Today from the Global Lane, 2018 was a robust year for the U.S. economy. Is more to come in the new year? And what about another tax cut? Combating cholera. This Catholic nun is fighting the deadly disease in Haiti and winning. We'll explain how she's doing it. Are America's best days ahead, or are we headed for disaster? And a final farewell. I'll share some personal thoughts on why America will miss the experience and character of President Bush 41. And it's all right here, right now, from the Global Lane. President Trump announced he'll hold off on imposing $200 billion in new trade tariffs against China. In return, Chinese President Xi has pledged to buy a substantial amount of U.S. products and roll back tariffs on U.S. automobiles. Last September, Mr. Trump announced tariffs against China would rise from 10 to 25% by the end of this year. But now he says they'll be delayed as trade negotiations continue. Well, here to give us some perspective on this is economic consultant, senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Stephen Moore. He's co-author of the book Trumponomics. What are your thoughts on this ceasefire and this trade war with China?
Big victory for Trump, I think. I think this is a big victory for the U.S. economy, for American farmers and automakers and our auto companies. China has been cheating and stealing in the trade negotiations. Trump is the first president in a long time to stand toe-to-toe with Beijing and say this can't stand. And so I'm very relieved by this. I think it means that this is the first step in a real new relationship with China where they start playing by the rules and reduce their tariffs. We've opened up our markets to them. They have not opened up their markets to us. And Trump is right that, he says that, I didn't start this trade war with China. They started it 10 years ago. And there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people that are defending Trump and his policies. So tell me, I know Wall Street has expressed, they've been a little nervous about the whole China trade tariff situation. Also, the Fed continually increasing the interest rate level. So what do you think? Are their fears now calmed a bit, or?
Well, I think Trump was right about the Fed. The Fed 2 months ago raised rates, and they also announced they're going to keep raising them and raising them, and that did spook the financial markets, and we saw a big decline in the stock market. And then when the Fed backed off of that a week or two ago, we've seen a nice, increase. So I think he's right that as the old saying goes, the Fed was taking the punch bowl away from the party just when it was getting going. Yeah. In terms of this China deal, look, I don't want to make too much of this. One thing about China, it's like the old Soviet Union. You can't always trust what they say. Beijing will say one thing and do exactly the opposite, just as the old Soviets used to do.
Reagan always said trust but verify.
Exactly,
right?
And I think that's where Trump is going to have to make sure there's enforcement and validation that China is living by their agreements, because in the past they haven't always done that. But I think it's a good start. I think Trump is coming home now from Argentina with a victory in his pocket. But look, this is just the start. I want to be clear about that. There's still huge abuses that are happening in China against American companies and American workers that need to be resolved.
And they may continue for a while.
They could be.
It's not a quick fix, is it?
But, Trump is using these tariffs. I mean, he said this a few weeks ago at the Rose Garden ceremony. He said, I use these tariffs as a negotiating tactic to get these other countries to behave. He's always said, I just want a level playing field. Yeah. If we cut our tariffs to 10%, you cut your tariffs to 10%. China hasn't done that.
Well, it worked with Europe. That strategy worked
and
with
also
the EU.
with Mexico and Canada. So far, so good. But this is the big battle. It really is the battle of our time. Will China or the United States be the economic superpower over the next 25 or 50 years? And, China is engaged in, look at what they're doing with their military. They're building it up in a very aggressive, dangerous way. They've stolen $300 billion a year of our technologies. When American companies try to do business over there in China, they often, steal your patents, your trade secrets. Oftentimes they even take up over ownership of the company. So that's not free trade.
Stephen, let's look ahead to 2019. 18 was a pretty good year economically.
You better believe it.
Yeah,
really.
We're
going to end up with economic growth about 3.5%, which is In 8 years, Obama never got us anywhere near that.
So what's the good word for Americans? How will this affect
Well, this
Americans?
is a great question because there's been a lot of chatter on Wall Street and among some like Goldman Sachs saying, oh, we may see a recession on the horizon. I don't see it. I just don't see it. I think the tax cuts are still just kicking in. Trump has really gotten government off the back of our businesses. You talk to businessmen and women now, they say things are really good for the economy. Now, I'll tell you one area I'm a little worried about with the economy, and that is the housing market. It's cooled off,
It sure has,
and that's partly because of the Fed. You know, when they raise rates, when mortgage interest rates go up, that means housing is more expensive. So
what about GM laying off 14,000
workers?
workers?
I'm not too concerned about that. I mean, look, my heart goes out to the people and family who are affected by that. I hate to ever see a plant close. But my goodness, we've created 1 million construction and manufacturing jobs since Donald Trump was elected president. So every time you see a plant close in the United States, now we're seeing 5 or 10 new plants, opening up. Manufacturers and construction companies today say their biggest problem is finding enough workers to do the jobs.
Another tax cut coming in 2019?
I'd like to see it, but I'm doubtful. And I've got a two-word reason. I was going to say Nancy Pelosi, but that's right. And they are opposed to any kind of relief for families. Pelosi has said we're part of a resistance movement. So even if something is good for America, they are, there's an old saying that some liberals hate Trump more than they love America.
Okay, Stephen Moore, Senior Fellow of the Heritage Foundation and author of Trumponomics. Thanks for being here.
God Almighty is a God of blessing. He always wants to bless his people. But how do you get that blessing? And what principles will unlock that secret?
In Miraculous Blessings, Pat Robertson shows you how to open the floodgates of God's awesome blessings in your life.
In order to have a blessing, you've got to be blessable.
Discover what the Bible has to say about God's covenant of blessing, the laws of blessing, and what are the hindrances to the blessings of God.
The words of Jesus, they are as valid as the law of gravity, and if we follow those laws, we will be blessed.
You'll see amazing true stories of everyday people whose lives were rescued and transformed by God's miraculous blessings.
But even the doctors acknowledge that this had to be a miracle.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com to become a CBN partner and get miraculous blessings today.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Cholera is a disease you don't hear much about in industrialized nations. It mostly strikes the impoverished in third world countries. Last year, more than 1 million cases were reported worldwide. More than 5,000 people died from fecal bacterial disease. Some of the worst hit places are in Africa, but according to the World Health Organization, during the past 8 years, more than 800,000 people have suffered from the disease in Haiti. Nearly 10,000 Haitians have died from cholera. But that's changing thanks to the work of one nun from Kentucky. Sister Lorraine Lauder is a missionary with Water with Blessings. She's worked hard to eradicate cholera in Haiti, and as a result, one of the country's largest cholera clinics has closed its doors. Sister Lorraine, thanks for joining us today. So how did you end up in Haiti, and how did you decide to tackle cholera head on?
Well, Water with Blessings has been in Haiti since about 2012. Just because our focus is always clean water for God's thirsty children wherever they're in need. And Haiti is a major place where children suffer and die because of dirty water.
Well, tell us about the community of Veretz and what happened there.
Well, Veretz houses one of the major clinics, which is in the Albert Schweitzer Hospital there. It is actually downriver from the original source of where cholera broke out after the 2010 earthquake. And so it's been persistently a place where cholera returns because cholera is an issue between kind of a dance between sanitation issues and water. So we realized that while we were working all over the country there in dozens and dozens of communities and doing very well, that was really kind of a scattershot kind of approach, and that to really address the issue of cholera, we were going to have to be very intentionally strategic. So we chose Veretz as a place where cholera has persisted on a pretty large scale, and yet we felt that we would be able to find local coordination and collaboration to work with us in the church there. We have a team of young Haitians who go all over the country and train women almost every day to be water women and use this great filter and create clean water for their own families and other families around them.
It's just a small filter about the size of a toilet paper roll?
Yeah, that's a common comparison.
Yeah.
Little filter right here, you can see it is very small. And it's very easy to use. So you just turn on the gravity by putting it down. I don't know if you can see it. I think I'm going to have to.
If you raise it a little higher, we can see it. There we go.
Well, it work because it has to have gravity to work. See?
Yeah. So that's clean water now.
Yeah, it's actually filtering water right there. And this water that I'm filtering, can you see in there?
Yes.
Okay. So this water that we're filtering out of this bucket up here, that came from a local creek here in Jefferson County called Floyd's Fork, kind of a local name for nastiness. And this water is now cleaner than U.S. bottled water standards. We've actually had water women in 47 countries. We just passed the mark of having trained 85,000 women. So all of those women have one of these filters. They have our training that's done according to our protocol, which takes 3 to 4 hours. They have follow-up programming, and they're all filtering according to their covenant that they made with God. They promised God, signed their names, that they will filter for 3 other families around them.
Finally, I want to know, what role has faith played in motivating you to do this?
Well, it's been everything. It sustains me day to day. We start off every day here with prayer, and that prayer is for everyone who's involved, especially the women, and for all of us, that we will be able to recognize when God is opening a door for us and for this mission. I just have a very strong conviction in my heart that God means for all people to have access to clean water, that that's God's will, and that our task is to fulfill God's will.
Parents, the Superbook Bible app is a great way to get your child reading the Bible, because in today's busy world, we can use some help. The free Superbook Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible, playing great games, watching cool videos, discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available now.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
We had 4 jobs that didn't go right, but, we didn't waver in our faith.
That's when God put on my heart that we needed to do the well.
Within a couple of days, we got an insurance refund check that we had no idea was coming.
And here we are, this year, it's just boom.
You go out and help other people, and you get rewarded for it.
Get Pat Robertson's latest teaching, Miraculous Blessings.
A Gallup poll taken earlier this year found that 60% of Americans believe our young people will have a better life than their parents did. That was the highest percentage since the last year of George W. Bush's presidency, when it reached 66%. So are the country's best times still ahead, as most people believe, or are we headed for an economic, social, and political decline? Our next guest believes America is on the brink of disaster, but there are steps that can be taken to save us. David Barton is founder and president of Wall Builders. He's co-authored the new book, This Precarious Moment: 6 Urgent Steps That Will Save Your Family and Our Country. Interesting book. So disaster may be ahead? Why? What do you see happening?
Well, there's a lot of choices to be made. We're at the brink on several areas where no nation has made that choice and come back from it. For example, even though we think things will be better for our kids want something totally different. Right now, in college, 75% of students in college want socialism instead of the free market economy. No nation has ever become socialistic and remained a free and prosperous nation. So if we get what the kids now want, we won't have the same America. So we want them to have better, but they don't understand what's at stake. So they have, and that's the interesting thing in the polling, is 75% of students want that, but when you ask them what socialism is, they can't define it. They've just been taught that that's what they need, that's what they want.
Some even like communism.
Well, communism, socialism, all rank higher than free market economics. And another concerning area is 53% of students in college right now think that free speech should be limited. They don't agree with free speech, and 19% of students actually believe that you should have the right to use violence against free speech you disagree with. So things that we consider fundamental tenets of freedom, they're not into. And so that's one of the things, that's why it's a precarious moment, is we want the best for our kids, but at this point, they don't have the experience to know that what they want has never worked in the history of the world.
David, how did it get to that point?
It got to that point through education. Our education system right now is so far skewed to the left. We think we send kids for a great education in math and science and what we call STEM, the basic core elements. Right now, if you look at Harvard University catalog, on-course catalog, search for sexuality. You'll find 295 listings in the current Harvard catalog.
Wow.
Wait a minute, I thought we were doing math and science and intellectual and reading and history and government. No. We're doing other things. So education is no longer what it used to be. As a matter of fact, the U.S. government now says that the age of adolescence ends not at 18, where it was for, it now ends at the age of 35. University of Connecticut came out with what they call negative learning. They said right now they follow kids going into college, coming out, and after 4 years in college, they know less than when they went in as a freshman. So they're paying $100,000, losing knowledge, coming out with great debt, and unable to get a job. Only 27.4% of college graduates right now can get a job in the degree field. So our education system has failed miserably.
Well, in your book, you talk about restoring relations with Israel. We're falling short in the area of race relations. You also talk about immigration, embracing biblical thinking. Explain some of those.
Yeah, in Israel, I mean, we've got the best relations we've had since Israel became a new nation in '48. President Trump's done great, except it's not necessarily translating back here. Last year, there were 1,600 anti-Israel events on college campuses across the country. Hate crimes against Jews have doubled in the last year. The anti-Semitism is at an all-time high in America. When you look at the next generation, 66% of millennials don't know what Auschwitz is. 22% have never heard of the Holocaust. So our relationship with Israel internally, from the citizen standpoint, is not near as strong as it is on the international side with President Trump. And that's what we focus on in the book is we're not worried about federal solutions or state solutions. what can each individual do to make a difference in these areas? And you get healthy from the bottom up. So the church is another area. The church has made itself irrelevant.
How about race relations? I know there's a problem in the church.
There's a problem in the church with the race relations, and there's some really good solutions on race relations. I mean, you take Senator Tim Scott, black senator from South Carolina, James Lankford, a white senator from Oklahoma, and these two guys have got a great plan of how that as individual people, we invite the other race into our house. Come, let's eat meal together. Let's break bread together. Let's talk. You know, I'm not black. Tell me what it's like to be black. And white guys say, oh man, slavery is over 150 years ago. You guys got to get over it. No, that's not the way it works in the real world if you're actually a black person. And so we don't know how to think like they do. They don't know how to think like you have to spend time together. And right now the church is very segregated. So many schools are still segregated. So individual things that we can do, very, very easy.
And we're living in a time with a very polarized, divided society, fractured America.
We are.
How did it get to that point? Again, is it education or does it go beyond that?
It is education. We're at a point now where 2 out of 3 Americans say there is no absolute moral truth. There's nothing that is absolutely morally wrong. Well, rape is? No. It depends on... Well, murder is? No. So we no longer have a consensus of belief on what is right and wrong. Among young people, it is, at this point, 3 out of 4 young people. Young people believing there is no right and wrong. And when there is no right and wrong, then you're polarized. You know, the thing we had at the Great Depression was you didn't have crime outbreaks, even though there was depression and poverty, because everybody still believed the 10 Commandments, and you believed the Golden Rule, and you believed the Good Samaritan. We don't have that moral foundation today.
We're running out of time, but quickly, I know with the passing of H.W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, there's been a lot of talk about returning to civility, that he was a kind man who talked about 1,000 points of light, kinder and gentler nation. What do you think? Can we get back to that?
Well, he was a kind man because of his faith. He was very outspoken about his faith. People don't remember that one of the platform planks he had when he ran for president was restoring school prayer. And so you look at his speeches, and we just posted a number of his speeches where he quotes Bible verse after Bible. He was very open in his faith.
Pro-life, too.
Pro-life, very pro-life. His wife was not, but he was. And so from that standpoint, that's where a lot of civility comes from, is the teachings of Jesus, the teachings of the Bible. So the more secular you become, the more polarized you become. If you want to get back to civility, you need to get back to religious foundations.
Wonderful book, This Precarious Moment. We appreciate it. Thank you, David Barden, for being here.
Appreciate it, brother.
God bless you.
Good to be with you.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
Americans a bid a final farewell to their beloved 41st president. And I have some personal thoughts. I met George H.W. Bush in 1980 as he campaigned for president in Michigan. I was working in local news in Flint at station WJRT TV 12. Little did I know then that eventually I'd cover his presidency as a CBN News reporter and bureau chief in Washington, D.C. As we put our microphones on before the start of the interview, we shared some words. I found Mr. Bush to be a kind man who shared positive thoughts about the people of Michigan and his prospects for winning the Michigan primary. He was friendly. He put me at ease. I felt he truly cared about people. He was a kind gentleman. Mr. Bush defeated Ronald Reagan in Michigan. He went on to serve as Reagan's vice president. In 1988, I served as senior press secretary for Pat Robertson's presidential run. That's when I experienced Bush, the political competitor. Those who fought against Bush and his campaign manager, Lee Atwater, know that Atwater was a ruthless political operator. It seemed he failed to embrace Mr. Bush's kinder and gentler approach on the campaign trail. To everyone's amazement, Pat beat Bush in Iowa in the caucus, but later he lost to him in South Carolina. Atwater had an extensive political network of volunteers and others to tap into in his home state of South Carolina, and that turned the tide in the campaign. It led to Bush victories against Pat throughout the South. Now, the people of South Carolina saw Bush as Reagan's man. They had to support him because they believed he'd carry on with Reagan's policies. I'm sure many of them were disappointed after Bush became president because he didn't. He purged most of the Reaganites from his administration. He wanted his own policies to prevail. So what legacy does George H.W. Bush leave for America? Before he became vice president and president, he served as ambassador to Beijing when Nixon and Kissinger opened the door to China. He also served as U.S. ambassador to the UN, CIA director, and RNC chairman. But I think he'll mostly be remembered for managing the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of communism, and the reunification of Germany. Ronald Reagan was the architect. Bush was the manager. Here's what German Chancellor Angela Merkel said about him.
He was the father, or one of the fathers of the German unification, and we will never forget that.
And remember Operation Desert Storm? Bush and an unprecedented coalition of countries joined together in the Middle East to force Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. He used shock and awe to overwhelm the Iraqi military. Many people wanted to keep moving the tanks all the way to Baghdad, but Bush, he knew there was little political will domestically and internationally to do that at the time. The strategy was to push Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, then get out, not occupy. Domestically, conservatives will never forget that read my lips, no new taxes pledge at the 1988 Republican convention. He later worked with the Democrats to raise them. Now, how could we forget the time that he looked at his watch in the middle of a debate with Ross Perot and Bill Clinton? Those two things may have contributed to his re-election loss in 1992. But as for me, I'll always remember President Bush as an optimist. He spoke of a kinder, gentler America and talked about 1,000 points of light, Americans loving one another and performing selfless acts of kindness. We sure could use more of George Bush's humility and civility, couldn't we? Those are truly Christ-like attributes. So farewell, Bush 41. Thank you, Mr. President, for your kindness, for serving your country honorably, our last World War II president. And no worries, Mr. President. I doubt they'll serve you any broccoli in heaven. Well, that's it from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, Facebook, and Twitter. And now on broadcast TV on the CBN News Channel. And until next time, be blessed.